Thank you so much for coming to the Arlington Author Salon. I am Jenny Brown, and I will be your MC for tonight. And I'm so glad to be here at Kickstand, and thank you, Emily. I just saw you, but thank you, Emily, our wonderful Kickstand hostess. Tonight we're going to hear from three wonderful authors. First up, we're going to have Kate Mingoya-Lafortune, Kate Woodworth, two Kates, and then finally Tim Weed. And for those of you who haven't attended one of our events before, we like to call this a reading series with a twist. So each author's 15-minute presentation has to have something else that tickles the senses. So we will look forward to seeing what our three authors tonight present for us. At the end, we will have a Q&A for all three authors together, so hold on to all your questions till then. Few other announcements. We also want to thank the wonderful staff at Kickstand who stays here and will serve you up coffee and tea and whatever baked goods are there. So please do avail yourself of what we have. I also want to give a shout out to Sarah Reagan of our Robbins Hall Library. I do have a little remarks from the Arlington Libraries Foundation, who is one of our sponsors. So tonight's event is sponsored in part by the Arlington Libraries Foundation. The Arlington Libraries Foundation is dedicated to helping open the doors to all who are curious, create an inclusive space for the Arlington community, and ensuring the library's future as the cornerstone of the community for generations to come. Supporting the Robbins and Fox Branch Libraries, the Foundation works to create a place where readers and resources connect. The Arlington Libraries Foundation raises funds to bridge the gap between assets and aspirations in order to maintain a world-class library. We help support current programs and launch new initiatives. The Foundation believes that libraries are more than physical spaces to find books. They are windows into adventure, innovation, creativity, community, and opportunity. We strive to make that possible by investing in the libraries we love. So you can go to arlingtonlibrariesfoundation.org if you want to learn more about that. Okay, good? Duty done? Okay, now one of the things I want to say is we have in the audience tonight Anjali Mitra-Duva, who founded and ran this for 10 years with Whitney Scherer, who's not here. Wave, wave. And so we want to thank her for starting this off. We are taking it over, a group of us. So there's me, Yelena Lemberski, Becca Cairns, and Alexandra Grave. So we're going to be working to bring more local authors to you. If you want to make sure you find out what we're doing, we do have a newsletter sign up if you're not yet already on our newsletter. Books are for sale right over here. Mike from the Book Rack. Please consider buying books to support local authors and our wonderful bookstore. I want to give a shout out to the Book Rack, which is actually celebrating its 50th year. And they're having a party in November at Town Hall, and so you should all buy tickets. I will be there. You'll see me. I'll be the one with the drink in my hand. So I hope you will all talk to Mike about getting those tickets. And then finally, I want to mention that we are having a book fair. So the Arlington Author Salon will be posting our popular annual book fair at the Roasted Granola Cafe on Saturday, November 8th from 2 to 5 p.m. We're going to have a great lineup of authors and their fiction, nonfiction, and poetry books, including mysteries, thrillers, novels, memoirs, essays, and even picture books. It's an informal community event where authors and readers get to talk to each other one-on-one, and it's a great opportunity to buy new signed books for the holiday. So Yelena and Alexandra have a list of all the authors, so you can find them afterwards if you'd like to know. And I did forget one other thank you, which is Yang is here from ACMi, so he'll be filming the event. And people can watch it online afterwards. I know everyone loves to watch themselves online. All right, our first author up is going to be Kate Mingoya-Lafortune. Kate serves as Groundwork USA's Chief Officer of Climate Resilience and Land Use. Kate is a people-centered climate adaptation planner, community organizer, educator, parent, and cautious optimist. Raised in an environmental justice neighborhood, she's committed to furthering a future where all people live in clean, thriving communities. She's the author of the recently released book, Climate Action for Busy People, and was named the 2024 Grist Fixer. She received a BA in biology from Reed College, a master's of science education from CUNY Lehman, and a master's of city planning from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Kate, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see you. There's two things that are going to be passed around. They're in jars. One is some fresh compost. I promise it doesn't stink. Give it a smell. The other are some nice fall leaves. Also nice. Give them a smell. So, as was mentioned, I'm Kate. I'm a climate adaptation planner and author of Climate Action for Busy People. And often when we talk about the climate crisis, it moves to a global and wilderness context. And I'm sure you've heard this before. Receding ice sheets, polar bears drowning as they swim between ice floes, snow crab populations collapsing due to lack of sea ice. But because we all live in urban environments, our experience of the climate crisis looks a little bit more like this. It might be flooded basements in the spring. I'm sure many of you remember that haze of orange and pink wildfire smoke that landed over the East Coast a couple summers ago from Western wildfire. And if you're feeling like this, if you've got a case of what I call the climate bubble guts, which is this anxiety about the climate crisis and what we could possibly do, I think you're paying the right amount of attention. It is alarming, it is disturbing, and especially over the last, say, 30 to 40 years, the solutions that we've been given can feel really divorced from the severity of the crisis, right? Like cut your soda can rings, line dry your laundry, and you should do those things, but it's hard to feel like that's enough when people are in danger. And so that's why I wrote Climate Action for Busy People. It's a book that's divided into 3 parts. The first is, why do things look the way that they do, with some neighborhoods hotter and wetter than others? Spoiler, our neighborhoods don't look like this by accident, which means they're not going to change by accident. The second piece goes into what you can do now if you've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes on a weekend to keep your family, your home, your community safer. And then if you're feeling empowered, the third part of the book focuses on how you can organize at the hyper-local level or municipal level for change. And I love to start presentations off with this photo. This is the Lower Price Hill neighborhood in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I love this picture because of how differently you would experience a hot summer day on the left-hand side of this dotted line than on the right-hand side. Left-hand side, tree canopy cover, shaded, cool, water gets absorbed. The right-hand side, which I cannot emphasize enough to you, is on the same block, looks really different. There's a huge expanse of impermeable pavement that's going to pull in solar radiation and radiate it back out, creating the urban heat island effect. And with nowhere for water to go, that side of the picture is likely to flood. If you were to zoom into space and look at data from Landsat 8 and 9, which are these satellites that are taking pictures of the Earth about every 8 minutes, you would see a picture that looks really similar across the entire city as you would in that one neighborhood. The neighborhood is designated by the star. On the western side, or the left side, there's a really robust tree canopy. On the right-hand side of the city, or the eastern part, not so much. And that has a huge impact on the way that we experience heat. This is ambient air temperature at 6 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and it's already hot on the right-hand side compared to the left where the trees were. We see this in Boston too. This is Metro Boston. We're all right here, hi us. And this is tree canopy cover, impervious per pavement, which are things like parking lots, driveways, rooftops. And then this is heat. And in Boston Metro, there can be up to a 66-degree difference between the land surface temperature in Somerville and the land surface temperature in outer Arlington. And surface temperature is like if you touch the ground as compared to ambient. And that's huge, that's tremendous. And at this point, you're probably bummed. This lady's book jacket says she's hopeful, and she's just here telling us sad and disappointing things. This is where the presentation turns around, because we already know what to do. If you have ever sat underneath a beautiful tree, or if you've seen water collect in a rain garden, you have a sense of what some of the solutions are. And infrastructure solutions for the climate crisis are not actually all that complicated. For heat, it's really 2 things. You either want to block the sun so that the heat is not absorbed, or you want to bounce that off. This picture on the right-hand side is from a project I did in Yonkers, where we painted low-income housing roofs white to help bounce the heat off of the roof. We found that residents saved over the course of the summer $128 on their cooling bills that summer. It costs $500 to do the project. It's a pretty good return on investment. The other thing to think about is water, which is another big risk, and the infrastructure needs are really twofold. One is making sure there's a clear path for water to get into the drain, and then second is making sure there's not too much pavement so that that rain can be absorbed by natural things. So when you see parking lots like this, or if anyone's been to the Porter Square, I hate that parking lot, it's kind of the worst of all the worlds. It's hot, it's wet, there's not a lot of greenery, but we can make changes. And one of the ways you can do that is by advocating for changes to local policies. In my book, I talk a lot more about this, but it's things like understanding what's the difference between your mayor and your city councilor, and what are their jobs, and what's their obligation to you. How do you get involved with them? How do you get them to come out to see the things you care about? Also things like engaging in participatory budgeting. If you're in Somerville, you have that. If you're in Arlington, you should ask your city councilors for that. And then business improvement districts. How can you as a business owner advocate for changes to the built environment to make things safer for your customers and workers? So I'm gonna tell you one story, tell you a couple of quick things you can do, and then I'll finish up. I have a daughter, she's 8. And when she was in daycare, I would bike her from our home in Somerville to Cambridge. And I would sweat buckets the entire summer when I went along Somerville Avenue. And I noticed at some point, this is taken around this time of year, that every single one of the trees from Porter Square to Wilson Square was dead. Desiccated sticks out of the ground. So I wrote to the city forester and I said, hey, what's going on? Are you guys gonna replant? And they told me, well, you know, we think there's a gas leak that's smothering the roots of the trees. But the gas company, Eversource, claims no responsibility and refuses to fix it, and we're not gonna plant until it's fixed. So I reached out to Mothers Out Front, and with a $60 gas sniffer, we went down Somerville Avenue and took our own data, which is something that you can do by counting trees, by counting clogged storm drains, by collecting information about gas, and we're finally able to pull together a big enough coalition of the municipality and residents to pressure Eversource into fixing the leaks. So now if you go down Somerville Avenue, there are 28 trees that are now 2 to 3 years old that are alive. That's pretty cool. One thing I want to emphasize is that in any organizing work, you can't do this alone. I talk a lot about this in my book, but I think there's kind of 3 people if you want to affect change at the local level that you need. The first are experts. These are people who know how things work. In my case, the expert was a city councilor, Jesse Klingon, who just knew how the infrastructure committee worked, because I had no idea. He also told me that the gas line is managed by a different part of the city than the sidewalk, which is managed by a different part of the city than the trees, which is managed by a different part of the city than the roads, and none of those people talk to each other. So someone who can help you navigate that is helpful. Also allies, just people who are willing to show up like you guys. And then naysayers, who are folks, in my case it was someone from the city who tries to poke holes in all your arguments. And those people are really annoying and they're really useful. And you want them around because they help you to hasten your argument. All right, here's where I wrap up. What can you do today if you have to pay bills and take care of family members and stay hydrated and exercise and you only have a little bit of time? First is to clear any clogged storm drains. This is a great time of year to do that. Get a rake, just clear whatever one you can see from your house. A lot of cities are developing adopt a drain programs. Somerville does have one, and you get to name your drain. These are some of my favorite names. Alexander the Great. It's draining men. I think these are cute. The other thing you can do is that sometimes, again, different contractors that work for different departments will mess up infrastructure unintentionally, and there's no way for the city to know. Please be that squeaky wheel that tells the city if you see poorly maintained drains. Capturing stormwater is a great way to keep it out of your basement. If you want to learn how to hook up a rain barrel, see me after this. I will walk you through the process. I got the barrel free on Buy Nothing. It took 10 minutes to hook it up to my gutter, and now I have water when there's a drought for my garden. Next thing you can do, and this is controversial in Boston, just reduce the size of your driveway. Do you need all of it? Do you need all that pavement? If you don't, you can reach out to depave.org, which has groups in our area, and they will come and dig up the pavement for free. You have to pay for the dumpster and provide snacks. And then they'll plant something beautiful there for you. Other thing you can do is to help mature trees. During extreme heat events and droughts, water, the rule of thumb is usually 1 gallon per inch of diameter of a tree, but really I just leave a milk jug on my front porch, fill it with water, and on really hot days, I'll water those mature trees on my block and helps to keep them alive. Same thing supporting tree conservation ordinances, because baby trees are like baby birds. They're kind of ugly and not very useful, and it takes a while for them to contribute. So we want to protect the ones we have. And now, why did I pass around compost and leaves? It's because you want to also improve your soil to increase this absorption capacity. The area that we live in actually has a history of brick manufacturing. If you've dug into the soil around your home, you might notice it has a really high clay content. So doing things like 1, composting, or 2, just leave the leaves on your ground. Like, don't rake, like just leave them. It's a home for the insects, and they'll decompose. That will help to increase the soil absorption. And finally, get to know your neighbors. Host or attend a block party, because during the crises that will come from the changing climate, that's not the time to get your neighbors, to know your neighbors during an emergency. So host a block party, learn people's names, just say hello. I have a neighbor who lives across the street. She's 94. Mary has lived in her home for 70 years. And because I know her, I can knock on her door during a heat wave and say, "You good? How's your AC? Are you okay?" And that keeps us safer. So that's it. Looking forward to the conversation. And I just assure you, you can make a lasting change at any of those scales.
Unfortunately, we don't have Cookie's book here tonight. Where can we get it?
Porter Square Books has some copies. I think Amazon's got like 14 copies left. It's around. Okay.
Great. All right. Next up, we have Kate Woodworth. Kate Woodworth is the author of Little Great Island, and IPPY, or IPPY, I don't know how you say it, gold medal winner for regional fiction and a literary fiction finalist from the American Book Fest. Called an extraordinary achievement and a pure pleasure to read by the National Book Award and PEN Faulkner Award winning author Ha Jin. Little Great Island is a story of love, redemption, and climate change on a small Maine island. Her first novel, Racing to the Dark, was called a compelling exploration of mental illness by Booklist and an auspicious debut by Publishers Weekly. Racing in the Dark was first published in 1989 and will be reissued in spring of 2026. And we are very lucky that Kate seems to have baked for us, so cookies will be coming around as she speaks. Kate?
Thank you. And you're all probably wondering what cookies have to do with climate change. So I'll let you know in a minute. But before we go there, I wanted to just acknowledge Kate for a moment. She literally changed my life when the first time we met, which was right here, and she told me about cleaning out storm drains. And I've now become a storm drain cleaner addict. I forgot that I could name a drain, and I'm really looking forward to doing that. Kate also had pointed out to me the difference between the temperature and the flooding that occurs between different neighborhoods, with a lot of that being based on the socioeconomic profiles of those neighborhoods. And that's something that I've really started to pay attention to as I write my monthly Substack. And I'm not sure, I mean, that was always there right in front of me, but I'm not sure I would have noticed. So thank you very much. As I think many of you, or I hope some of you at least know, Little Great Island is about a small island off the coast of Maine where the community needs to find a new economy because the lobster fishery has collapsed. So don't panic. There is actually, it is not, that lobster fishery has not collapsed, but there is evidence that the catch is dropping and the lobster industry has a lot of other challenges as well. So there's no way of knowing the future there, but it did strike me that this is something, it's a very noticeable change in the climate that people could relate to. Where do the cookies come in? I did not set out to write a climate novel. I set out to just write some little vignettes and character sketches about an island off the coast of Maine, North Haven, which I happen to know well because my family summered there for a while when I was a teenager. And when we stayed there initially, we stayed in a building on Nebo Lodge where our father had stayed when he was a teenager and a young adult. But in the 60s and 70s, when we stayed there, it was a private home. And to say it was derelict would be a compliment. If you opened a window, the screen took a dive and went down onto the ground. If you walked into a room and pulled the string to turn on the one light bulb that came from the ceiling, you ended up with a broken string in your hand and you're standing there in the dark, which did not work out very well for me because I was reading a lot of Stephen King at the time. That building, because it was in such bad shape, our parents figured there was no way that this was we could destroy it, we being the four of us who were teenagers. And it turned out that word spread. So a lot of the other parents on the island decided this was a great place for their teenagers to go when they needed to blow off a little steam. So particularly when it was foggy, we had a whole group of people come over to our house and play games. And I made chocolate chip cookies. So that's where the cookies come from. They show up in the book. In the book, the cookies are made by Alice McGavin. And Alice is an island native, and she occasionally comes over and does cooking and cleaning for her neighbors, which is a summer family named Harry Richardson, or the Richardson. Harry Richardson is one of the main point of view characters in the book. And I situated Harry in what, in my mind, was Nebo Lodge. I did change it, I changed the color, I changed the location, but I kept a lot of my memories in there, including the chickadee wallpaper, which still exists in the same bedroom. I saw it just this summer. The old piano, and the building was filled with glass jars that had screws and washers and sea glass in them and all this wonderful stuff. It was just great for the imagination. The other character in the book, who is a primary point of view character, is Mari McGavin. Mari is island born and raised, but at the beginning of the book, she's returning to the island after an absence of 10 years, and she has recently escaped from a cult. She has with her her 6-year-old son, who is furious with her because she's taken him from the only home he's ever known and separated him from his father. Something has happened to Levi. Mari's not exactly sure what, and I'm not going to tell you. You need to read the book to find out. Those two characters begin their journey with very different ideas of what they think should happen for the future of the island. Initially, it's just a standoff between the two of them, but as they start really talking about what they want to do, all of the relationships on the island begin to break down. It's not just between the people who summer on the island and the people who were born and raised there. It's within families, it's within romantic relationships, it's within long-term friendships. And I really wanted to investigate that dynamic. It's almost the opposite of what Kate was describing with the get to know your neighbors now. It's really that formation and protection of community as we start moving forward. And that was ultimately where I realized the book needed to go. How do we bring all of these people back into an appreciation of community and the value of all of us working together? There are a number of other characters, point of view characters. We have Alice McGavin, who is Mari's mother. We have Sam, her father, who is a character I personally love because he initially showed up in a short story I wrote in the early 1980s. So I got to bring him back. We also have a character named Mr. Estabrook, who is known as the butterfly diplomat. because during his career as an international diplomat, he was constantly reminding people of the butterfly effect. Another point of view is that of the island itself. And that to me was critical, because I think one of the issues we've run into is that people tend to speak about us as humans as different from the natural world. We are part of the natural world. We're about as much the natural world as any other creature. And I wanted to really indicate that with those sections that include a lot of its past, its present, its future, and it's all of the birds, and it's all of the creatures in the sea, and it's the insects and the creatures on land, because we are in fact all connected through the web of life. When I first started writing this book, I had never actually heard the term climate fiction. So I did a bunch of research, and I made some decisions about what I wanted to do, including that I really wanted to have it set in the here and now. That was important to me. You will hear from Tim in a minute, who made a different choice. And I think it's really interesting to look at what authors choose and why in terms of how they're going to present their climate stories. I also learned that initially the hope was that climate writing was going to lead to climate action. Climate fiction in particular would lead to climate action. Climate fiction had been around long enough that it was clear that that was not happening. And there was a study done by somebody at Colby College who pointed out that actually there is an empathetic response. People do feel worried and motivated to do something, and that goes away fairly quickly. I gave a lot of thought to why that happens, but at a very practical level, I thought, what would happen if actually within the pages of the book, we included a call to action? And so that's where I came up with the Be the Butterfly initiative. And it's all written up in the back of the book. Essentially, it's very much like what Kate's talking about. It is an invitation to just do one small thing to help protect the climate. There is a list of climate writers in there who are participating by having suggested nonprofits that people could support if they choose. And I do have a card with all of those authors and their nonprofits listed if anybody would like that. So I am going to read a section from the book. It's a brief section. It is from Mari's point of view, and I think I've introduced you to all of the characters who show up in these pages, with the exception of Pastor Aaron, who is the patriarch of the cult where Mari has been living. Homecoming. Mari. What are you doing? Levi asks, because Mari has hesitated at her parents' back door, the same door she went through countless times as a child and as a teen, wondering whether to knock. Her mother, Alice, no more than 15 feet away, stands at a window with her back to Mari, hand to her hip, and stares in the direction of the barn. After 10 years of trying not to think of this paint-peeled Cape house, this kitchen, this person, Mari is surprised by the minute familiarity of her mother. Flannel work shirt, baggy, faded jeans, no-nonsense, uncombed haircut. Her mother's barn boots stand on the mudroom floor among the waders and soiled sneakers and snow boots and garden tools and thermoses and gloves of a dozen varieties that are the necessary familiars of her parents' lives. Somewhere in the jumble, even after all this time, there are likely discarded possessions of Mari's own. No doubt the ghosts of her many arguments with her mother still linger in the heat vents, in the pantry corners, on the undersides of chairs. "Mama," Levi says, impatient, "why are we just standing here?" Levi is unused doors that must be knocked on. Sorry. Because at God's bounty, all property was public, a tenet that Mari had found compatible with her long-held feeling that the concept of land ownership made no more sense than attempting to own a plot of sky or a slice of spring. Many of the worst altercations she'd had while living on Little Great Island stemmed from the absurdity of seasonal visitors attempting to claim ownership of everything from acres of land to the island's way of life when they only spent weeks on the island each year. All Levi knows of ownership and possession is that closed doors offered no more assurance of privacy than an open one, although no one entered Pastor Aaron's home or office unless their presence was requested. At the sound of Levi's voice, Alice looks up, and Mari watches her mother's expression go from question to surprise to some tangle of feeling that produces both a hand clutching the fabric of her shirt and a flash of horror as she registers Mari's shaved head. By the time Alice has pulled the door open, she is crying. Her mother gathers Mari into her arms, and Mari wishes she could stay there, that she never left, that all the words she and her mother had struck and jabbed each other with had never been spoken. The smell of mother, dial soap and wood smoke, coffee and freshly turned soil. Squeezing her eyes shut, Mari forces herself to appreciate the moment because it cannot last. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, our final reader tonight is Tim Weed. And Tim Weed is the author of 3 books of fiction. His new novel, The Afterlife Project, finalist for the Prism Prize in Climate Fiction, received a starred review from Library Journal, and was a Middlebury Magazine editor's pick and a New Scientist Best New Book of the Month. Tim's work has won or been shortlisted for the Eric Hoffer Book Award, the Writer's Digest Annual Fiction Awards, the Tobias Wolff Award for Fiction, and Fish International Short Story Award, not done yet, the New Rivers Many Voices Project, and many others. He holds a BA in Spanish from Middlebury College, a Master's in International Environmental Policy from the University of California, and an MFA in Creative Writing from Warren Wilson College. Co-founder of the Cuba Writers Program, Tim teaches fiction at Grove Street and is on the core faculty of the Newport MFA in Creative Writing at Salve Regina University. And Tim, I would like you to explain what your handout is before we start handing it out.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody for hosting, and thanks you all for coming. So, the thing that I brought is mushroom elixirs, which are part of, they are part of the book, but they're also part of my life. I drink them every morning, sometimes in the evening too. There are 2. The one that's in the red thermos, I'm not sure if you're going to see the thermos, but basically there are 2 options. One is a mushroom elixir with lion's mane and cordyceps and some other things that also has maple syrup in it. And then the other one is just plain, doesn't have maple syrup. It has lion's mane, cordyceps. It has a little extra lion's mane.
And I'm just going to say that Becca's going to pass around the one with the maple syrup, and I will follow for anybody who wants it without the syrup.
And just so you know, I mean, supposedly, and I think this is actually true, that the lion's mane is really good for your mind. It's actually been clinically proven to, is this kind of coming in and out? Bottom's coming out. So it's been proven to, clinically proven to work on dementia. And it's also really good if you, I play chess with my wife online, and my scores get better when I drink lion's mane. Cordyceps is good for energy and exercise and things like that. but they both help you sleep as well. So anyway, that's it. So just to talk a little bit about the inspiration for the book, I had 2 books out. I had a novel and a collection of short stories. I was looking for a new book to write, and I wanted it to be big. I wanted it to be not big in terms of a big, thick book, but I wanted it to be about big things, like geologic time, the human species, the future of the human species, and climate change, and things like that. And so I was like, there were 2 reasons that I wanted to do that. One was that I love fiction. Jenny mentioned that I teach fiction, and I teach it because I love it. I love the challenge of it. Fiction is challenging because, unlike nonfiction, it's not true. It's a lie, right? So if it's a lie, why would you read it? I mean, you know it's a lie. The writer knows it. Why would you read it? Well, it has to do some extra things that nonfiction doesn't. It has to be immersive. It has to be alive on the page. Hopefully, it's entertaining. But also, it has to get at some kind of deeper truth. And so I love the challenge of doing that. That's the challenge of fiction. So the reason that I'm really passionate about writing fiction, and one of the reasons I wanted to write a book like this was I wanted to see if I could write a book, a novel that works dramatically as a novel, that comes alive on the page, and that's immersive and entertaining, that also tackles these big issues. So there was a challenge, an aesthetic challenge. And then the second reason was because, as Kate mentioned at the beginning, we've all been talking about it. I think one of the reasons we're here is that I was feeling down. I was feeling anxious about the state of the world and climate change and biodiversity loss and things like that. And so I wondered if writing the book might be somewhat therapeutic. It might help me think about it, especially researching the book might help me think about some of these things. So, but I didn't really know where to start. I didn't really know how to write this book. But I sort of had an idea about the story. But anyway, at the time, I was working for National Geographic. I've had a parallel career in international educational travel. And I was working for National Geographic as a featured expert. And I was on a trip in Tierra del Fuego. It was a small ship, an expeditionary ship with about 150 people on board. And we left from Ushuaia, Argentina, and went around Cape Horn, landed on Cape Horn, and then came up through the Beagle Channel and up through the Straits of Magellan up to Punta Arenas, Chile. And it was an amazing trip. We didn't see any other human beings besides those of us on the ship for the entire time. We were in one of the world's most remote wilderness areas, so seeing lots of seabirds and ocean life and just incredible scenery. And we also, the ship had 12 zodiacs so that we could do landings. Every day we do 2 landings, to like glaciers and penguin colonies. It was quite an adventure. But on this ship there were 2 scientists that I started having conversations with that were very interesting. One of them was an astrophysicist who was the head of the Mauna Loa Observatory at the University of Hawaii. And the other was a paleoclimatologist from Princeton. And I was having these conversations and I started to work in some questions about my book. And so for the astrophysicist, I was like, hey, what do you think about I was interested in the kind of the deep future. So I was like, well, what do you think about one-way time travel to the future? And he said, oh yeah, totally. In fact, we're already considering how you do this, because if you're going to do interstellar colonization, if you're going to go to Proxima Centauri, it's going to take 10,000 years. And we don't have the technology to build a ship that big, so you have to keep the person alive. So he said, so what you do is he started scribbling equations on a napkin. And he was like, quantum physics and general relativity. He's like, yeah, here's the equation. Yeah, you can do it totally. I was like, thank you so much. So that was the inspiration for that part of the book. And then the paleoclimatologist said, so what do you think about the future of Earth? This is very interesting. If you ever get in a room with a paleoclimatologist, have a deep conversation, because what they do is they study the deep past to try to predict the deep future. What are the levels of greenhouse gases that will be, that we've gone through in the past? Part of the research that I did for this book had to do with, past climatological regimes and what we can expect. And one of the books I read was a book called The Ends of the World. It's about the 5 mass extinctions that have happened in the history of the Earth so far. And we're, of course, at the beginning of the 6th mass extinction. But what was interesting about that book, and what this paleoclimatologist was telling me, is that all of those 5 mass extinctions were, to one degree or another, besides the one that was an asteroid, the famous asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, all of them were caused by climate gases, by greenhouse gases that were produced by volcanic eruptions and continents splitting apart and things like that. All of them, the concentration of greenhouse gases was much higher than what we are going to experience. So that's a note of optimism. The problem is that for us, it's happening very quickly, in a blink of an eye. So anyway, this paleoclimatologist was like, yeah, so in the next 200 or 300 years, it's going to get bad. Things are going to be really hard. This is the time when things are adaptation, exactly what we've been talking about, not only for ourselves, but also for many of the creatures that we share this planet with, is going to be difficult. But after that, we're going to, no matter what scenario we're under in terms of the IPCC scenarios, we're going to burn through or stop burning through all of those climate gases and greenhouse gases. And to the degree that we can, stop burning them, great. That means that we're giving ourselves hope, for our children and grandchildren, things like that. But in the long term, what's going to happen is we're going to reach a peak. There's going to be a peak shortly after that, a peak temperature, and then it's going to gradually weather out of the system over 100, 200,000 years back to pre-industrial norms. So he was saying, in the 10,000 years, here's what the climate's going to look like. And anyway, this was kind of the inspiration for the book. Talking to those 2 scientists gave me permission to write the book, and I did end up feeling more hopeful about things, in part because nature, nature is going to survive. If you look at these past mass extinctions, nature, Earth, life on this planet makes it through. It's going to come back. It's going to diversify. We have a chance to hopefully save some of these species that are going to go extinct and mitigate the 6 major mass extinction. And I find that hopeful that nature is going to survive. And that was one of the things I think that I came out of the book more hopeful about. But the fact that it was inspired by these scientists, my characters are scientists, and also the inspiration for the book took place in this vast wilderness area. And I was inspired by the sense of topographical awareness that comes to you when you're traveling through a place like that. If you've gone camping or on a river trip, and you spend 3-4 days out in the wild, you get a different feeling. Things start to feel different. You start to feel more connected. You start to understand where you are topographically. And that's another thing that I was trying to do in this book. It is not a cautionary tale about climate change. It is not meant to be an argument against climate deniers. What I really wanted to do was to write an immersive post-apocalyptic adventure story that gives you some of the emotional experience of a dark future. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this, and Kate kind of mentioned this idea of what can cli-fi, what can climate fiction do, and to me it has to do with mythology. I think we're at a place right now as a species where we need new mythologies. We need a new mythology that recognizes what these guys were saying, that we are part of nature. We were sort of birthed by this planetary life. This what James Lovelock called Gaia. We were sort of by this ecosystem, and we're part of that. And we need to go from the paradigm shift that I'm looking for is we need to go from feeling like we are the exploiters of nature to being the stewards of nature. And so that's kind of, if someone says, well, what would they want people to take out of this book, that would be it. That's the paradigm shift, and I think that mythology, and I do think that books, novels are sort of contributing to a fabric of new mythology. That's why climate fiction, I think, has the potential to change. So anyway, it's essentially a quest story in which a team of scientists working in the aftermath of a disaster that has brought humanity to the brink of extinction uses technology originally developed for interstellar travel to send a lone test subject 10,000 years into the future to discover whether anyone might be alive. There's another timeline as well, but I won't go into that. I'll just read you a quick section from that timeline of the the deep future. This is Nicholas Heinemann, who's a microbiologist who finds himself in this, stranded basically in this old growth wilderness of the future in northern New Hampshire. And he finds a place to sort of make his camp, but his job is to try and find human survivors. So at a certain point he starts walking south toward the coast. He fights his way south through a tangled forest of scrub oak and brush, and eventually east along a kind of tidally saturated causeway. Eventually he comes to a salt marsh, like a broad green meadow, though in reality it's much less pleasant to walk across than a meadow would be, as the seagrass has its roots in the same grasping muck that lines the bottoms of all the swamps. On the far side of the salt marsh, his progress is halted yet again, this time by a deep tidal river. But on the opposite bank is an area of high white dunes, and the shifting wind brings the sound of pounding surf to his ears. He wades in, keeping a nervous eye on the fast-moving flow, thigh deep, chest deep, neck deep, raising his arms to keep the bundle dry. His feet lose contact with the sandy bottom, and he tries to kick toward the dunes, the strong incoming tide sweeping him upstream. Eventually he does make it over to the dunes, where the sand is pleasantly dry and hot on the callous soles of his feet. When he crests the dunes, he's rewarded with a view of the vast sparkling ocean. It's a surprisingly emotional sight, the dull roar of surf breaking on a pristine beach, stretching out into the distance in both directions, pewter green rollers glinting in the sun as they rise, curl, and come crashing down into the fizzing backwash, crashing in, fizzing out, leaving a strip of wet khaki-colored sand at the tide line where sanderlings sprint back and forth in their frantic quest for sustenance. Seabirds everywhere, in fact, ospreys wheeling, terns riding the wind like delicate origami, herring gulls and black-backed gulls, petrels, willets, turnstones, oyster catchers, cormorants, shearwaters, and something like an albatross. Out beyond the break, the swells are dotted with the glinting heads of seals, and white-feathered gannets fold their wings to plummet, one after another, into the schools of baitfish that glimmer in shoals just beneath the surface. A pod of dolphins erupts a few hundred yards out, leaping joyously as they make their way north along the coast. Forget about loneliness. Put aside despair. The sight of this thriving ecosystem is a balm to his spirit, to the still raw psychic wound of having witnessed the rapid decline of the planet's oceans in his own time. The last of the coral reefs gone by the time he'd finished high school. Algae blooms, hot zones, garbage gyres the size of continents, mass death washing in on the putrid tide. He retains a few happy memories from early childhood, but as time went on, any visit to the shore became a depressing and actively unpleasant reminder of all that had gone wrong. Beaches littered with single-use plastics, medical waste, the desiccated skeletons of strangled sea creatures. Jellyfish concentrations made swimming or body surfing inadvisable on most days. And who would want to swim anyway? In a sea redolent of chemicals and the putrefying carcasses of dead fish, sharks, and seals. The scene unfolding below him now stands in heartening contrast. The raucous chorus of piping and screaming seabirds, the onshore breeze laden with the distinctive smell of living seawater, a wandering tide line of black seaweed and yellow kelp, driftwood logs, copious shells, witches' money bags, and not a single scrap of plastic in view. Out on the sparkling swells in the distance, he can even make out the waterspouts of a small pod of whales. It's a staggeringly beautiful shoreline, rich with life, and it would make a perfect seasonal base for a band of semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers. And yet the whole beach, as far as he can see, is unmarked by a single human footprint.
Thank you so much to our authors. I would now like to invite actually the three of them, don't sit down, come up here for a Q&A. We're happy to have them answer questions. And I would like to point out, one lady, yellow shirt Kate is Kate M, and shawl Kate is Kate W. So you can specify who your questions are for. So, yes, right here.
Hi, I have a question for Kate W. First of all, I read your book already, and I find it really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I wanted to hear a little more. Obviously, you said the island being the inspiration and part of your life and history. But can you talk a little bit about the process of writing this book, and also what were some of the challenges?
Sorry, what was the last part?
some of the challenges in writing the book, and also, what kind of research did you have to do or not do in order to include writing about a cult?
Maybe repeat the question just for the folks in the back.
So the question has to do with the process of writing the book, what some of the challenges were, and also what the research was that I had to do. The short answer is that this book took me about a decade to write, and there was a moment when my husband came home and I was blasting music and balling up the pages of the manuscript and throwing them against the wall. So if that gives you some idea of some of the fun I was having, arguably no one sits down and writes, no sane person decides to write a novel. I absolutely assure you that you have to be flat out nuts to write one that has 12 different points of view in it. And part of where that came from was really this process of just sort of enjoying writing these character sketches and vignettes. And then I had this moment when I realized this is actually going to be a novel. Challenge number one, which of those characters stayed in? Which of those characters went away? Challenge number two, it seemed really not fair to readers to suggest that they follow 12 completely developed points of view, so I had to choose two characters who carried the bulk of that. Then I still had these 12 other points of view, and that, as I went through the editorial process, involved things like making sure that the alternating chapters worked, that we didn't have two Mari chapters together, and also ensuring that across the book, Harry and Mari had approximately the same number of pages, and that the island, all those other points of view, also balanced out. So there was a lot of, I used visual aids, I was a lot of counting, and I really was thinking a lot about creating a piece of music in that really trying to make it all balance at that level. Research, I've never been in a cult. I had to do some research not only on cults, but on cult recovery for both adults and for children. I've certainly eaten lobster. I have handled lobster. I had to find out the life cycle of lobsters. And I also had to be certain I had my facts correct in any of those lists in which there's species. In fact, at one point I had, in an early list, I had skunks in there. There are no skunks on the island in Maine that I was particularly focused on. And there was a moment when I was reading one of those early sections in front of Linda Greenlaw, who was the female sword fishing captain from A Perfect Storm. And as I start reading this, I thought, I'm here with Linda Greenlaw. Like, if I have anything wrong, I'm gonna hear about it in about 3 seconds. And I was bright red. And when I got to the end, she said, I'm gonna give you the greatest compliment I can give anyone. She said, I completely believed in your island. So yeah, lots of research, lots of work. And the biggest challenge, I think, in the end was trying to figure out how to end that book. Because I just thought I wanted to end it on a hopeful note, and I couldn't figure out, it's not that I couldn't find out a way to hope, I couldn't find a way to make my characters come back together. And I did.
Other questions? Yes.
This question is for Tim. I'm really intrigued by this idea of transition from colonizing and conquering to stewardship. And of course, there are traditions around the world that are very adept in that. So my question is, how hopeful are you that those mythologies change into the conversation about?
So the question is about transitioning the paradigm from this attitude of colonizing to an attitude of of being more stewards. And she pointed out that there are cultures that do this already, that live in that paradigm. And And the final part of the question was, how hopeful am I about doing that? And I am weirdly hopeful. Because I think that there are cultures that have showed us how to do it. And also in the process of writing this book, it was kind of, in a way, it was kind of partly a thought experiment. What happens to a human being who finds himself 10,000 years in the future completely isolated? And then meanwhile, there's the other timeline, which is these scientists that are traveling across this post-apocalyptic world trying to find a second test subject to effectively colonize the future, in a sense. And it was interesting that, when you're writing a book, a novel, you don't really know what your themes are. At least I don't early on. In my first novel, I didn't even know what the themes are until after it was published, and some critic or someone said, "This is what." I'm like, "Wow, I didn't know that." In this book, I tried to. But one of the themes of this book is, besides this idea of humanity, the need for humanity to transition, to change the paradigm, and to become what I think is our destiny, to be the stewards of nature rather than the destroyers of nature. But also this idea that every place that they go, these people go, human beings are trying to find meaning. And they do that through telling themselves stories. And we think of it as religion. And they go to a particular island where there's one kind of crazy cult or religion going on. But then this guy, Nick, who's in the future, also as a way to cope with loneliness, with utter loneliness, and with the feeling that he's going insane, sets out to create his own religion based on the hunter-gatherer societies that have lived in the humanities past, and sort of goes about piecing together his own religion. So that was kind of a fun aspect for me. And I am hopeful, actually. I don't know why I am, but I do think, I have seen paradigms shift. You can see paradigms do shift. And I think that's kind of the work that we're doing. It's in different ways working on shifting that paradigm, and I think it's going to happen. It may not be quick. We're in a very dark time right now, but I'm hopeful.
All right, I'm going to cheat and call on myself. Here, that's you. Kate M., you talked about the importance of composting, but it feels like composting isn't that easy for a lot of people. I know that if you can afford it, there are services, but do you have any tips for those who are in apartments or just have a hard time?
Well, I'll tell you a couple things. Some of them are gross and weird, and some of them are accessible. I was talking about this earlier. When I first started composting the first 3 years, I live in a standard Somerville triple-decker, and there's a little backyard space, and I got a free compost off of the Buy Nothing group and had no idea how to take care of it, and was just throwing food scraps in there. So every spring, you would get this wafting smell through the window of dirty diapers, just real rank, big kid-eating solid food diapers. And I think that the big keys are just overdo it with the browns, lots of leaves, lots of things in it. You can also, it's also not the only thing to do. I say that to say that anything that you can do to, I think one of the most important things is finding something that's within your locus of control so that you don't lose hope over the fact that change is possible. So that might be composting, it might be rain clearage, it might be hosting the block party on your block and bringing the chips in a really good playlist. But I think that the biggest danger that we face with the climate crisis is that of thinking that we're so locked into a certain level of screw that no change is possible after this. And I think that's really dangerous. You mentioned a little bit earlier about that paradigm of stewardship, and something I've been thinking a lot about recently is how quickly that paradigm changes. I remember 25 years ago when the evangelical movement was the leader on pushing back against the climate crisis and on clean energy and that interpretation of having dominion over the earth as being stewardship as compared to dominance. And we saw how quickly that changed. And my hope is that people can start to change quickly to hope. And that might be through composting and really overdo it with the greens. You can also do, if you're in an apartment, indoor composting. I have a colleague in Milwaukee who does that, and he has the best rhododendrons in front of his house because he does red worm composting, and there's tons of guides online. But really anything you can do to retain hope and know that that change is possible, even if you can't chain yourself to a legislator's desk. Even if you have other obligations that you need to do, every single little thing you do does matter.
I think we have time for about one more question. Does anybody, right here.
This is quick for Tim. Can you tell us about the tea and how you make it, or?
So Yeah, did people like the thing? Okay, it's really good. I can't drink caffeine. What's with the, you like it with the syrup? Okay, well that's my neighbor's syrup. It's very dark, so it tastes like maple trees. But yeah, I mean, I do it. I can't drink caffeine, so I do. There are commercial. The one tonight is from a company called Four Sigmatic, and it's called the Focus Blend, and it's basically lion's mane, cordyceps, a couple of different herbs, and cacao. It has cacao in it, but it's a really good thing to drink either in the morning or when you go to bed. I also drink reishi. I have pure reishi and pure lion's mane, and I just kind of put a spoonful in, just depending on my mood. Reishi is really good for immunity, for sleep, for calmness. Lion's mane, again, is good for focus, but also for sleep. Actually, the combination of reishi and lion's mane is supposed to be really good for sleep. So, I highly recommend it. And, also, it's a feature of the book because, they're in a time when they're not going to get coffee anymore, because that's from a different part of the world. And so they have to, and there are mushrooms everywhere, so that's what they rely on. So that's kind of what I'm doing, but it's an accident. It's because I can't drink caffeine.
I want to thank all three authors very much. We appreciate your talks and your presentations. I want to mention that our next salon is going to be on January 8th. If you're not on our newsletter, please sign up. There's a sheet over here. We will be sending out the information on the next salon soon. And don't forget about our book fair, and buy a book. The authors are here. They will sign them for you. And so thank you again to everybody.
ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.